Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. All right. Hey, okay. We are again, we're in the second of the evangelical views on hell called eternal conscious torment, and we're going to wrap it up tonight. As I mentioned before, there's really only about 10 or 11 verses that eternal conscious torment advocates will use to justify the position that the wicked are conscious for all of eternity and are tormented and tortured by God in hell for their sins, and that never ceases for all of eternity. So that's eternal conscious torment. Now, um, out of the 10 verses, we've covered 8 of them so far. And what we've concluded is that at least up to this point, none of the verses actually support the eternal conscious torment view either, because they don't say anything about hell, like we looked at last week, Luke chapter 16, the rich man and Lazarus. That's about the intermediate state. That has zero to do with hell. So you can't even look at that verse as a proof text. But we also saw that there were other verses that just said nothing about the length of hell. They just said that the wicked are in torment and gnashing and weeping and gnashing teeth. Well, all 3 views believe that. I mean, that's biblical right there. But the part they were missing was the eternal part of it, right? You need the eternal to be eternal conscious torment. So we looked at that. We also looked at some of the verses like the unquenchable fire, the worm that never dies, actually better support the view which we'll cover next week called conditional immortality, because we looked at unquenchable meant that it can't be resisted, not that it goes on forever. And we looked at all the different examples in the Old Testament showed that the fires don't last forever. It's their destructive power is the thing that lasts forever, right? So we looked at those verses and found out that so far, none of those verses support the view that the wicked are consciously alive for all of eternity to suffer torment and torture. Now we've got the 2 left tonight. Now these 2 are, if you looked at basically any list and asked someone to compile a list of verses that they think support eternal conscious torment, these 2 are almost going to be on every single one. And they are, if you were to ask the advocates, these are the nails in the coffin. These 2 verses are the ones that prove demonstrably beyond any shadow of a doubt that in fact eternal conscious torment is the correct view, right? So we've saved the best, so to speak, for last, and let's kind of go through it and figure out if either one of these 2 verses lend support to that view, right? The first one is in Revelation chapter 14 in verses 9 through 11. And this is where the claim is that the wicked are tortured or tormented day and night forever and ever. And so let's read Revelation 14, starting verse 9. And it said, "And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." All right, now, is the argument. The argument says, hey, look, it says that they're going to be tormented with fire and sulfur, right? This is the fire image here, in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb, and their smoke of their torment goes up, what? Forever and ever. And they have no rest, day or night, these worshipers of the beast, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So it seems pretty clear here that these individuals are going to be tormented forever and ever with fire and sulfur. And that sounds exactly like the traditional view of hell, correct? Okay. All right. Now let's step back and we'll ask, we'll kind of evaluate this here. Let's see here. There we go. Oops, went too far. All right. We got some questions here that we need to ask. Again, going back to hermeneutics, we talked about this. You've got to take a look at the context and we've got to ask ourselves some questions, right? Because on the surface, this seems like a pretty solid verse to me, but we have to ask some questions. Who are the people being tormented? Okay, when does this action occur? Like, what is going on? Are there time-bound elements within the text itself that might indicate whether or not this is forever and ever, or whether or not there might be some end to that? is there an Old Testament passage that this is referring to, right? And if so, what is the context of that? Because particularly the book of Revelation, it doesn't quote the Old Testament, it refers to the Old Testament over 500 times. Almost every single symbol in the book of Revelation is already in, particularly the Old Testament, and it's already defined by the Old Testament. So we don't have to come to Revelation with a blank slate. It's referencing the Old Testament, and we know typically what those symbols and things mean. Also, are there any New Testament passages that might provide clarity, right? So that's that immediate context, the who and the when, and then the broader context, the Old Testament and New Testament context, in order to see if anything will shed some light. So before I do this, who are the people being tormented? We go back to that verse, yeah.
Specifically, people that took peace, so it's talking tribulation.
Correct. Correct. 100%. The people that are undergoing this torment are people that have done a very specific thing at a very specific, and you just mentioned it, when it occurs. Like you answered the question here. This is not talking about the wicked that have existed from the beginning of time. This is talking about very specific people that are in the tribulation, and in the tribulation, they take the mark of the beast. And because they've taken the mark of the beast, even though they've been warned, they now receive this torment that's being talked about here. So when you think about this, nobody to date that is wicked, that is since the beginning of time until today, that has died, is included in this group. That make sense? They're just not. This is not, in fact, we could stop right here. This verse has literally nothing to do with hell. This is talking about the tribulation, right? Now, if you think about the time frame of the tribulation, remember, this happens towards the end of the tribulation time period, right? And after the tribulation, what you have is what comes after the tribulation. You've got the tribulation ends with what? Second coming of Christ. And then what's after the second coming of Christ? The 1,000-year reign. That's right. The 1,000-year reign, the Messianic kingdom, millennial kingdom. And then there's the resurrection of the wicked. They stand before the great white throne, and the books are open, and then they get cast into hell. So this event that occurs here happens, this event here happens over 1,000 years before people are ever even thrown into hell. So this literally has zero to do with hell. And to be honest with you, I think it's very unfortunate that some people that I think have really good hermeneutics in almost every other area that I study, and I'm not going to name names, I'm like, they're really good Bible scholars. But then when they come to this, they just, because they've already bought into the fact of eternal conscious torment, they'll just take that and they'll ignore the fact that this is not the wicked. This is specific people have taken the mark of the beast, correct? All right, so we could stop there and just say, look, whatever this verse is, in whatever eschatologically we make of that, whatever that tells us about the future of those individuals, that is a very small group of people compared to the wicked that have existed since the beginning of time. Okay, so, and this is tribulational. This is not saying anything about what happens in hell. Okay. The other question here, let me just, before I do this, were there any time-bound elements in that verse that might also provide some clues to us? We do know it says that it's going to be forever and ever, right? Okay, so that's one thing. That certainly sounds like eternal, and it is. That is a reference to eternal. So there's some consequences here for these people that are eternal. But what else did it include in the verse that is also a time element that might shed some light on whether or not this torment of these individuals does last forever and ever? Is there anything else? Right here, verse 11. And they have what? No rest, day or night. Now, how long does day or night last for? Is day or night forever? Correct. And we right here, day or night ceases to exist. In Revelation 25, it says, and night will be no more. They will need no light or lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. So remember, we looked at forever and ever can mean eternal, and typically forever and ever does have this idea of the thing lasting forever. But in this case, it's talking about the smoke of their torment, and we're going to get to the smoke of the torment here in just a moment. It's the smoke of their torment that goes up forever and ever. It doesn't say their torment or their torture goes on forever and ever. It says the smoke of that is what goes up forever and ever. Now, the idea is that you can't have smoke unless people are being burned, so that if the smoke goes up forever, ever and ever, the people are going to be burned. Well, we're going to look at that phrase, the smoke of their torment. We're going to find out that that does not mean the people are being burned forever and ever. It has a different meaning, and we're going to look at the Old and New Testament ideas behind that, just to show that, frankly, there's idioms here that people are just completely missing, that if they just looked at the rest of Scripture, it would shed light on that whole thing. But clearly, there are some time-bound elements here that, yes, this thing will last for as long as night and day last. This thing will, in fact, last. Now, I'm going to answer these other questions here because I don't expect you to know them off the top of your head. But are there any other contextual things within Scripture that would shed light on this verse that would give us better understanding of the meaning? Of course, the answer to that is yes. In the Old Testament, we have particularly Isaiah 34, 9 through 10. In fact, this is a reference to Isaiah 34, 9 and 10. Okay, so I have to just go back to Isaiah. It's like Isaiah 66 when it talked about unquenchable fire and the worm that doesn't die. That was a reference directly back to Isaiah 66. John is just basically referring back to Isaiah 34, 9 through 10. Also has an allusion back to Genesis chapter 19, verse 28, which is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. A New Testament passage. Is there a New Testament passage? And the answer is yes. Jude, verses 5 through 7. There's no chapter because Jude's only one chapter long. Jude, verses 5 through 7, and Revelation 19:3 are New Testament context for understanding Revelation 14:9 through 11. All right, now,
So.
yes.
Then, with that said, could you say that?
Oops. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could you say that when this happens, maybe it's during those 1,000 years, that's where they are for that
Correct.
time period.
Correct.
And then, of course, the rest happens.
Yeah, and then they, my view is yes, is that for that 1,000 years,
Right.
that time frame, the 1,000 years,
Right.
then they're brought up and they're judged, and then they're thrown into hell. And when they get thrown into hell, they suffer the same fate as everybody else. But just like the angels in Genesis chapter 6 who intermarried with women and created the Nephilim, and God sent the flood for that, those angels are in.
Says that they're in the.
They're not in Tartarus, right? They're in Tartarus, which is the place for these fallen angels, so that there are some angels that are not free to roam around because of the sin that they did. So in a very similar sense, these individuals here, because of their sin, they are now going to be tortured in a place for a period of time before they're brought up to the judgment. So that's certainly my view on this whole thing. Okay. Well, it doesn't say, the verse doesn't say, and we know that when we take a look at the different compartments essentially of Hades, there's Tartarus, which is for the angels, there's the abyss, which is the temporary confinement of angels. So Tartarus is the permanent confinement of those angels. The abyss, which is where the demons didn't want to get thrown, they said, send us into the pigs. They didn't want to go into this temporary area of confinement. Then you've got the bad side of Hades, which is where the rich man was, and then you have the Abraham's bosom, which was paradise, right? So you have these four compartments. That's all that we kind of know about biblically. Likely, if I was to make a guess, this is happening in the bad part of Hades, where the wicked are currently at, but it certainly could be some other place. They're not thrown into hell, though, because that happens later on. So I don't think that it's that location. But we don't know, because we're not given a location in the verse. So I always hate to say exactly where that's happening unless we've got clarity
No,
around it.
just clarification. So Tartarus, where the angels are being held.
That's the permanent one. That's the Genesis 6
So when you say,
angels.
yeah, when you say permanent, forever and ever?
Yeah,
There's no-
well, they're there until they get thrown into the lake of fire, because
Yeah.
the lake of fire is prepared for the devil and his angels. But they're kept in Tartarus so that they're not free to move around. These
Until they're destroyed.
and
Like,
correct. Correct. Right now, this isn't the tribulation. Correct. That would be my view. But whatever view you hold about where they are or what's going on with these individuals, it's happening in the tribulation. It's not happening when in hell. So it's not this, right? I mean, we could stop right here. But because this is one of the quote strongest verses for eternal conscious torment, and it is, and you'll hear it, go to church, you'll hear people, they'll point to this one here and they'll bang the Bible on you. I do want to go through and say, well, even if it wasn't that clear that this is not hell, because of the tribulational aspect of that, are there other reasons why we should not take that view when we look at this verse? I do want to go through some of those. Now, again, this is a reference back to Isaiah chapter 34, 9 through 10. And this is what Isaiah says here. It says, in the streams of Edom, the reference of their smoke shall go up forever and ever, that is a reference back to Isaiah 34, 9 through 10. And the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into what? Sulfur, and her land shall become burning pitch. Now look at this here again. We've got these two elements that we find in Revelation 14, right? Night and day it shall what? Not be quenched, right? So there's nothing, it's not going to cease. It will not be quenched until, of course, the judgment is finished. And it's what? Smoke shall what? Go up forever, okay? From generation to generation it shall lie waste, and then shall pass through it forever and ever. Now, here's the problem with this. This Isaiah 34, 9 through 10, this happened already to Edom. This was part of Edom's judgment. Both Isaiah and Obadiah predicted this, and this happened to Edom. They were, in fact, destroyed and wiped out. And Isaiah is saying, look, once this happens, there isn't going to be anybody coming back to rebuild this. Jackals are going to haunt it. This is what it says. Jackals will haunt it, things like that. But no one's going to come and rebuild this area. The devastation is going to be so complete. That's the whole point. It's going to be so complete. So the fact that this smoke going up forever and ever, like I said, you can go to that area right now. There's no smoke.
East of the Jordan River.
Yes.
Okay, in Jordan
Correct.
today.
That's correct.
It's a real place, and
It's a real place. It's a real place. There's no smoke going up forever, because that term, smoke going up forever and ever, does not mean that you're going to literally have smoke going up. This is a term that means the judgment is going to be, because the smoke indicates what? That destruction has occurred. And the forever and ever means that then destruction is what happens forever and ever, right? The outcome of the destructive act is what is going to last forever and ever. So if you applied that to Revelation 14 through 11, it would tell you that it's not that people are burning forever and ever. It's that when they are judged, the smoke of their torment, the forever and ever means that judgment upon those people, there's no way to get around it. They can't repent. They can't do anything to get out of that. Their judgment is sealed, and they will go through this, and their destruction is going to be final, right? Now, we've already kind of looked at this and said, hey, Edom is not currently burning, right? But the other thing we have to realize is Isaiah is one of the most poetic. In fact, he is the most poetic out of all the Old Testament books. Isaiah is a master poet. He would be like the Shakespeare or whatever else. Like he's that type of individual. And so he has a tremendous amount of poetry in that. And this is an idiom that he uses to signify the total and complete destruction of whatever it is. Whatever is being destroyed, that's his way of saying complete and total destruction, right? So Isaiah 34 gives us the two exact same things that Revelation is pulling from, and we know from Isaiah that it doesn't mean forever and ever smoke's rising up, right? So that means, that gives us a great amount of doubt that in fact we should take Revelation 14 to mean something different, right? Because Revelation, we already know how the Old Testament has used those exact same two phrases, and it's not used in an eternal conscious torment way. Now, the other thing that is being referenced here, and we'll build on this going forward, is this idea of the sulfur and the smoke going up as an example of total and complete destruction. So this idea of smoke rising up, and the smoke rising up as being the symbol of the thing being totally destroyed, actually starts all the way back in Genesis. And you can work your way through the Old Testament to see that same theme over and over again that God uses. And every time that it's used in reference to whatever the thing is that's being destroyed is gone, wiped out. Doesn't keep on burning. It means the destruction of that thing is final and complete. I'm just going to give you a few of these here. I've given you some other references right here. For instance, Deuteronomy, first one, Genesis chapter 19, 27 through 29. And this is after, in verse 23, I believe, God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah through this sulfur and fire that rains down from heaven. So the next morning, and Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord and looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like a smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. So we've got here that Abraham looks out and all he sees is this smoke going up, which tells him what about Sodom and Gomorrah? Don't go looking for survivors. There's nothing to find. In fact, right now, you've been there. Bill, I know you've been there. Yeah. I've been there too. There's nothing. You literally cannot find any remains of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not just that you find buildings broken down or whatever else. You find nothing. God literally wiped the whole thing off of the planet. That was what the smoke is. And so Abraham realizes, look, there's no reason to go down and look for survivors. Now, going on to Deuteronomy chapter 29, 22 through 23, again, just kind of seeing how this idea works its way out through the Old Testament. And God is saying here, and this is about, if Israel rejects God and goes into idolatry and things like this, there's a list of curses. This is the curses part of Deuteronomy, right? Deuteronomy has the blessings and cursings. This is curses. And the next generation, your children will rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a far land will say, when they see the afflictions of that land and the sickness with which the Lord has made it sick, the whole land burned out with brimstone and salt, nothing sown and nothing growing, where no plant can sprout, and overthrow like that of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his anger and wrath. So again, what we have here is God says, look, you do this, what is going to happen is your land is going to be wiped. It is going to be destroyed. Brimstone and salt. And look here's the important thing. Nothing can be sown, nothing will grow, no plant can sprout. An overthrow like what? Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's a reference back to the whole thing. So when God uses this idea of brimstone and fire, he's talking about a total complete destruction of something, not an ongoing destructive act, but a completed act, like we talked about, a noun of action last week. Then if we go into, I skipped a little bit here. If we go into like Isaiah chapter 30, verse 27, he says, behold, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with his anger and in thick rising smoke. His lips are full of fury and his tongue is like a devouring fire. So this is an example of this idea of God as a consuming fire where he destroys the wicked. That is a very common theme that we have in the Old Testament. Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 22 and onward, actually go into Ezekiel chapter 39 if you want to read the whole context of that. It says this, with pestilence and bloodshed I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain upon him and his hordes and the many peoples who are with him, torrential rains and hailstones, fire and sulfur. So this is, again, God's typical means of dealing with judgment upon nations, is this idea of fire and sulfur that results in their destruction. Now, what about some? And you can you can do kind of a search on this on your own just to kind of see how this builds in the Old Testament. But how about some New Testament allusions to this idea here? And there's also one we'll talk about next week. It's in 2 Peter. But I'll just cover the Jude verses 5 through 7 here tonight. Jude's talking about, these wicked people, and he's basically pronouncing some judgment upon them. And this is what it says in Jude chapter 5, Jude verse 5. It says, now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. Okay? Now, when he says that he destroyed those, what does he mean? What does destroyed mean? Destroyed means what? It means the people in Egypt were what? What?
Well, it's pretty destroyed and they are no more.
Yeah, but what does it mean? The people in Egypt, they were what? God did what to them? The firstborn. Kill them. Kill them. That's what it means here, right? So when we read, going back to what we talked about last week, this idea of destroyed meaning ruin, like I ruin a wineskin, when you find it in reference to people, it's pretty clear destroyed means that the people are dead. They've been killed, not just had like their reputation ruined. So here's what happened. These people in Egypt, Jesus, it's interesting, Jude says it was Jesus, the angel of death in this case, or the angel of death that goes around and that's him. It's Jesus here. Destroyed those who did not believe. Now here we go. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority. That's going back to Genesis chapter 6. But left their proper dwelling. He has kept eternal change under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Again, these are those angels in Genesis 6 that are in Tartarus, right? Just as, now look, these angels are kept in these chains and the destruction of these people, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued a natural desire, serve as a what? An example by undergoing a what? Punishment of eternal fire. Now, Jude is saying here that Sodom and Gomorrah are an example of what? Right here. Punishment of eternal fire. The members of Sodom and Gomorrah suffered punishment of eternal fire. Now, eternal fire does not mean the people of Sodom and Gomorrah are currently right now doing what? Being burnt. They're not, yeah, that's right. They're not burning.
They're dead.
They're dead. They were dead the instant the fire, I mean, they were literally dead the instant the fire and brimstone hit them. And that's what he's saying here. He's saying, look, Sodom and Gomorrah serves as an example of what punishment by eternal fire looks like, and that's what's going to happen to these wicked people. Punishment by eternal fire does not mean they are eternally burning. It means their destruction is eternal, and the destruction happens by means of or by the method of fire. Make sense? Okay, so this should hopefully start making some sense as we get to start working our way through this, that this idea of eternal fire does not mean a fire that burns eternally, just like unquenchable fire does not mean a fire that burns eternally. All right. So Jude kind of gives us some of the similar types of reference here. Now, here's the one I think that's really critical, though, for, well, first of all, we can dispense of Revelation 14 just because it's not talking about hell. But for those who still want to pursue it, say, no, I'm serious. And I've had discussions with people. They just still want to be like, no, this is. Here's the problem with that. Revelation chapter 18 and 19 use the same language, but none of those people advocate for Revelation 18 and 19 being people eternally burning with fire, or that the fire burns forever. But he uses the same words. And so you can't have it one way, and by the way, same author. John wrote book of Revelation. So the same author that wrote Revelation chapter 14 is the one who's writing Revelation chapter 18. Uses the same language, but when he uses it, it's very clear from this context that he does not mean the thing is continuing to burn for eternity. It means the thing that is destroyed forever. And the smoke of their torment just is an example. It's a symbol of that. So let's read this here. It's a lengthy passage, but I want you to get the context here and sort of feel what John is saying, and then we can bring it back to Revelation 14. Revelation 18 verse 1 says this, "After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living.' Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities.' Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds, mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning, since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. Okay, we're starting to see some of these terms here. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore, cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses, and chariots, and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. So notice how many times the judgment upon Babylon is that the things that she once did, this great city of Babylon, will never be done again, will be no more, right? Just listen to how many times the judgment is not implying, the judgment is explicitly saying that those things will never happen again because the city itself will be destroyed forever. Therefore, none of those activities that were done in that great city will be done. Okay, let's just continue on. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste, and all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? Now look at that. That's actually in the past tense. Babylon was a great city, but she's destroyed. She's no longer. Okay. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city where all who had ships at sea grew very rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon the great city be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. Okay, look at that. So the activities will be found, and the city itself will be what? Found no more. And the sound of the harpists and the musicians, the flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of the lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. And then Revelation 19:1 continues. After this, I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven crying out, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for his judgments are true and just, for he has judged the great prostitute who corrupted the earth with her immorality, and has avenged on her the blood of his servants. Once more they cried out, Hallelujah, and this is key. The smoke from her goes up forever and ever. Okay? So over and over again, John tells us here that what has happened in Babylon, the activities, will be no more. That the destruction means they all cease because the city itself ceases. And the smoke from her goes up forever and ever. Well, no one believes that Babylon is going to, for all of eternity, this city is going to just keep on smoking. It means that the destruction is complete. And it's very clear from the context that that's what's being said. All these things will be no more. So the smoke going up for never ever is just a symbolic way, going back to what Isaiah used it symbolically to just say the destruction of Babylon will be so complete, the city will be gone. And when the city is gone, that means everything that used to happen in the city will be gone as well. Make sense? Okay. So if you then take John and just interpret John by John, the idea that smoke from her goes up forever and ever means that people are going to be burning forever and ever just doesn't make any sense. We interpret John from John, and it's very clear. It may not be clear from the Revelation 14 text, although I think it's clear that it's tribulation. But even so, even if you look at and say these are going to be tribulation people, what would that tell you about the tribulation people? Does it mean that those people in the tribulation that took the mark of the beast, are they going to burn forever and ever? Not likely, because in Revelation 14, this term, the smoke of her goes up forever and ever, we now know that that does not mean that something burns forever and ever. We mean that the destruction of that, whatever individuals or the city or the activities of the city come to an end. That's actually what it means, right? So we just interpret John by John, that's what it actually means, right? Now, I'm not going to go into the eschatological, impact of Revelation 14. My only point is that it's clear both from the Old Testament usage of smoke going up, the New Testament usage, and particularly the in Revelation context shows us that Revelation 14 says nothing at all about hell. It sounds really good when you read it, but when you just look at the context, there's just no way. It doesn't hold anything. So this is that one, as you can see, I probably had a big X there, back here. Yeah, big X. Like this one just literally says nothing. So we really are down to our last and final verse. Like none of the other verses put out there by eternal conscious torment advocates have shown themselves to be worthy of that, right? And even including the last one. So we've got one, and this one is, if you would ask people, this one is, well, Revelation 14 and this one are probably tied, but this one right here, a lot of people go to this one and say, look, let me show you why people will burn in hell for all of eternity. And they'll go to Revelation chapter 20. Okay, so this is at the very end of the book, not the last chapter, but getting close to the last chapter of Revelation. And what is being described here is it's being described this 1,000-year reign of Christ. At the very end of that 1,000-year reign, there's going to be one final revolt, right? And then Satan, the devil, the beast, and the prophet, they're going to be judged. And then, of course, the wicked will be raised, resurrected, stand before God. The book of life is opened. The book of the works is opened. They're judged. And they're thrown into hell just like the devil, the beast, and false prophet. That's actually what's being described here, just contextually, just so you understand what Revelation 20 is all about. So starting in verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. So here again, we've got this idea that is just prevalent throughout the Old Testament in particular, of God destroying the wicked by fire. Comes down from heaven, just wipes them out, right? Okay, and consume them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Okay? Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each of them according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. Okay? Lake of fire is the second death, right? And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. All right. Now, here's the kind of logical thinking here. Verse 10 tells us that the devil, the beast, and the false prophet are, well, the beast and the false prophet have already been thrown into the lake of fire. That happened at the end of the tribulation. The devil was kept under chained for 1,000 years and released at the end to deceive the nations. And verse 10 then says that the devil himself, Satan, is thrown into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are at, and that they will be tormented day and night in hell forever and ever. Now, since they get thrown into hell and they are tormented day and night forever and ever, then verse 15 says all those whose names are not found in the book of life, in other words, they don't have eternal life, they will also be thrown into hell. Well, if, I don't know, that shouldn't say Lahe fire unless it's some sort of Swedish or Nordic, might be Nordic, Lahe, I don't know, I don't even know how you say them. Lahe fire. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so if they're thrown in a lake of fire, then here's the logical conclusion. If the devil, the beast, and the false prophet, when they get thrown into the lake of fire, if they're tormented for day and night forever and ever and ever, then the wicked who are thrown into the same place, they must also be tormented day and night forever and ever. That's the logical leap. Does that all make sense? Okay. Now, before I get into my evaluation of this, what issues do you see? I mean, just thinking about how we've approached this stuff, what issues might you see?
They have decided that eternity, there will no be day and night.
Correct. Day and night poses some, and even this idea of forever and ever, we've seen that with the smoke rising up forever and ever, meaning a finality of something, not necessarily that something lasts forever and ever, like the tormenting lasts forever and ever, but the fact that forever and ever can mean there's a finality of whatever happens. So that's great. The question I would ask you to think about is, what is the lake of fire designed to do? Because what it's designed to do, that is the thing that lasts forever and ever. Okay? Destroy, yes. So you're right. Over and over again, it's the destruction of the wicked. The lake of fire is meant to destroy, just like fire is consumed. We've even just tonight looked at all kinds of verses where it's just talking about God sends fire down, sulfur, brimstone, and consumes his enemy, kills them and destroys them. The lake of fire is meant to destroy. It's not meant as a long-term torture chamber. Okay? So even with it means to kill. Well, it means to kill, but when you're killed, you're dead. And when you're dead, here's the problem. We talked about this last week. The reason why do you think it's called the second death? Hell, the lake of fire is the second death. This is this, right? The second death is a symbol for the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the destructive means, and the second death is used as a symbol for that. When you say second death, it symbolizes what happens in the place. The lake of fire is the place. The second death is the thing that happens to those that go into it. Does that all make sense? That's what it says. So I forgot what I was even saying here, Rich. I know it was going to be. Oh, I know it's going to be important. It's going to be. Here's my question. Why is it called the second death? What's the first death? Everyone goes through the first death unless they're raptured, right? Before they die. That's the first death. That's the death that God promised back in Genesis chapter 2, right? Is death. That's the first death. Okay? The second death, you would think, would match or would be at least similar to the first death. Not some kind of weird separation thing or whatever else will kind of get into that. Like the first death means you died, the second death means you also died. The reason why it's the second death, though, is because, remember, the first death is not permanent. Because everyone, the wicked and the righteous, will all be what? No, resurrected. So the first death is you're dead, but it's temporary. It's not a complete destruction. Everyone will be resurrected, okay, to stand before judgment. This reason why it's called the second death, and the reason why there's no third death, by the way, and there's a reason why there's no second resurrection, by the way, there's only one resurrection, is because when the second death happens, that's it. There is no resurrection element. You know, we see in the New Testament in particular where Jesus raises people from the dead. Well, that's because the first death is temporary and it can be undone again through a resurrection. But when you get the second death, there is no second resurrection. There's no third death. The second death is meant to say, when you're dead, you're now finally forever and ever dead. That's it.
So that is angels and Satan's final resolution is he really does go, you go.
Yeah, so we'll tell you what, I'll give you my opinion on that, I'll give you my opinion on that. Let's put it this way. The view that we'll study next week, conditional immortality, you can hold either one of them. You can hold that the devil and his angels exist forever and are tormented, or that they go out of existence through the lake of fire. It doesn't, the view doesn't depend on anything at all. My personal view is that, yes, Satan and his demons are all destroyed as well in hell. And even this verse here says it's forever and ever. I think we have enough reasons to believe, just from what we've studied, that that can be actually interpreted a different way. It doesn't have to mean that they're there. We've got some other reasons. If you go through the book of Revelation, I've got some other reasons that I think are pretty strong indicators that, in fact, Satan is destroyed. Yeah.
And where I got that from, just reading, was in the beginning, Genesis 1, God created.
Yeah. Just to make sure this gets over there.
God created the heavens and the earth.
Mhm.
Okay. In the end, God's gonna create a new heavens and a new earth.
Correct.
So if in the beginning, before he started heaven and earth, there was nothing, at the end, there's a new heaven and earth. It just, where there's righteousness, then there can't be anything less.
Yeah, and
So-
we're actually gonna, you're stealing one of my slides again.
Oh,
You did it last week too. Yeah, thanks for stealing one of my slides. Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. Well, yeah, but anyway, okay, this is the justification. So my whole point here on this is that's the logical leap. Now, I want you to think about this for just a moment. Do you think, forget about everything else we've talked about, just think about the logical leap, or the inference, because there is a thing called the lake of fire, and the devil, the beast, and the false prophet, they get thrown in there, and let's say they are tortured forever and ever. Let's say that they don't go to existence. Let's just take that off the table. They're in there and they get tortured forever and ever. These other people get thrown into the same thing. Is that a logical leap that you can make to say, because these two different entities are thrown into the same place, that the same thing happens? Because that's the leap. That's the claim. The claim is these ones go in here and suffer forever and ever. These ones do. Because let me wind this back here just for a second. Notice what the scripture says. Who is it that actually is tormented forever and ever?
The devil and the false prophet and beast.
Okay, you have three individuals at most. Sorry, three individuals. Sorry, if I could count, three individuals at most that are tortured. Does it say anything about the wicked? Not at all. In fact, you have to skip through all the way down here, and the only thing it says here, if anyone's name was not found in the book of life, he was thrown in the lake of fire. This says this is the wicked here now, but there is absolutely nothing here that says anything about the timing of the wicked in the lake of fire. There just is not a connection. Now, someone could say, well, I mean, you could certainly say, look, because this happens to them, logically we could infer that it could happen to them. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. Let's explore that logic. Oh, this is, I see my animations here not good. I did this, by the way, today after I came back from being on vacation and a little sleep. So sorry about that. All right, here's a question. We already know question one. Who's going to be tormented in the lake of fire forever and ever? Devil, beast, and false prophet. The wicked are never said to be tormented in the lake of fire, right? That's just reading into it. Does the location of hell mean that the results are the same for humans as it is for the devil? Okay. That's a logical leap that's not a sound logical argument. It may be true, but there's nothing logically that would make you come to that conclusion, right? And here's the question I want to throw out to you. Take a human fire, take a big old bonfire. If you throw different things into the bonfire, does the same thing happen to those objects? Okay, give me an example. Okay, tin can, you throw a tin can in there. Tin can, you throw it in a fire, it'll they'll take the paint off. Eventually it does destroy it, melts it or whatever else, but it's different. Name something else you might throw in a fire. Christmas tree. Does a Christmas tree react the same way to a tin can?
No.
Not at all. Okay. Take dry grass, which again is what the Bible consistently compares the wicked to. They are chaff, they are weeds that are dry that get thrown into a fire. What happens when you throw a bundle? I mean, just take a big old bundle. Almost instantly, the thing goes up. Boom. Yes. So what we should conclude actually is that the location isn't the important thing. It's the object that is thrown into the location that is a better determiner of what happens. Okay. Now,
So the people are more like the grass and the devil's like a tin can?
I'm just saying they're different because let me ask you this question. The devil is I've got the answer. I got the answer here for you already. The devil doesn't have he's not physical. He's a spirit. But the wicked are going to be both body and spirit if you believe in dichotomy, although you could be a Christian physicalist and not, but it's totally fine. But let's say you are a dichotomist or even a trichotomist, body, soul, and spirit, right? That would be the three distinctions. Or a dichotomist would be spirit and soul are the same thing. So your body and spirit / soul. Or a Christian physicalist, it just means you are what you are. There's no division. It's just a different way of talking about emotions and stuff, but there's no actual world division. It didn't really matter, all three of those. The wicked are physical. They're not the same. They're at least physical. They're not the same thing. So even if we just step back and said they're not the same type of entity, we would expect to ask the question of, well, what will happen when you throw this type of entity into a fire versus the other one? Now, I don't know. I'm not even sure that this is what we would think of as just normal fire either, because the fire that it comes down from, it's a heavenly fire that comes down from God above. And so it's hard for me to imagine how that fire would torment a being that doesn't have a body. So again, even the fire element of that, there's some iffiness to what that actually means, because if you don't have a body, fire doesn't do anything to you. Does that make sense? It's not physical. Fire impacts physical things. It doesn't impact non-physical things, right? So there's even some stuff there. But I think the answer to question number 2 would tell us that, look, just the entities themselves will tell you that that's probably a logical leap. I would actually make the other leap. I would just say, look, it depends on what the entity is, not the thing where it is thrown into. All right. Question number 3, is everything that gets thrown into the lake of fire to be destroyed actually a real entity, a real thing that exists?
Yes.
Okay, you say yes. Anyone say no?
Well, that exists now. Satan exists, but he's not a physical entity. So I guess I'm.
That's why I said.
Well, so here's the thing. When we read Revelation, there's some things that are said to be thrown into the lake of fire. Some of them are obviously real. They exist. People in a resurrected body. Okay. The devil is obviously real. Nobody. What other things are said to be thrown into the lake of fire? Let's go back here. Okay, here we go. Death is thrown in and Hades is thrown in. So we've got a couple other things. Now here's where I'm asking the question. Okay. Is death a thing?
I don't think death is a physical thing, but there are
State.
it's a state. There are people in that state.
Death is an abstract concept that indicates the lack of life. You can't take death, let's say, throw it in a box or put it in prison. You can't take death and throw it into the lake of fire. Death just means the thing that was alive is no longer alive. It's an abstract concept of the lack of life in something. But you can't go gather death up, let's say, and put it in a box. It's an abstract concept. It's not a.
But the state of death can be done away with. Like there will be no more.
But that's an abstract concept. And what I'm saying is that you're not God isn't literally going to say, okay, death, where, oh, he's not going to pull death out of the prison cell and march him over here and throw death into like death. Death is not an entity in that case. Death is a concept. And so what you're saying is exactly right. The concept, so death being thrown in a lake of fire means that death will never occur again. So if you're anything that's living past that point will then continue to live because there won't be anything called death. There's no power. But my point is, death itself isn't an entity thing. You don't throw death in. That is complete symbolism. Does everybody get that? That idea right there is complete symbolism that John is using to symbolize the complete total defeat of the lack of being alive, right? Because if death is gone, no one can die anymore. Hades is actually a physical place, but what in the world will it mean to take a presumably physical place and throw it in the lake of fire? I mean, it'd be like God saying, go grab that boulder over there and throw it in a lake of fire. I mean, it's rock. I mean, you can't torture and torment a rock. Again, even though Hades being thrown in there, if you think that he's actually going to take a physical location and throw it in there, it could very likely just be that that's also symbolism, because Hades is what? The place of what's Hades? The dead. So death, the abstract concept of death, is thrown in a lake of fire. It's destroyed, can no longer happen. The place of the dead is destroyed, therefore you can't die because no place to put you. Does that make sense? So even whether it's talking about the physical like location right now being thrown in there, or whether it's talking about also an abstract concept of the place of the dead being completely done away with, there are things thrown in a lake of fire that are not literal things. They're concepts and conceptual. Now, here's the reason why I bring this up. I'm sorry if I'm not being clear.
Gehenna, where the dead bodies and all that were, there'd be no place like that again, even though that was a physical place.
Well, Gehenna is hell.
Yeah. Okay.
Gehenna is hell. Hades is the place of the dead. They're not the same place. Yeah. Here's what I'm getting at. Revelation is highly symbolic. Okay, highly symbolic. In fact, it's the most symbolic book in the Bible. It draws much of its symbolism from the Old Testament. The problem is sometimes you got to look at it, and some of the things that we see here that get thrown in the lake of fire are symbols. They're not real things. So we have to be really careful then when we look at what does it mean to be thrown in a lake of fire, because if it was just physical things that could be destroyed by fire, that would make it less symbolic, right? You throw people, you throw trees, whatever else in a lake of fire, they can get destroyed. But when you start throwing symbolic things that obviously can't be destroyed by fire, right, into that, it will tend to make you think that what is occurring in the lake of fire itself, even though it's going to be a real place of destruction, is maybe more symbolic than what we might have believed, because it symbolizes what? What does the lake of fire symbolize? It symbolizes the what? The finality. The finality of the destruction of the thing that is thrown into it. Does that all make sense? That's actually what the lake of fire is really symbolizing. Now, am I saying there isn't an actual place, the lake of fire? Am I saying that there is an actual fire that is going to destroy it? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that when you take other things that are not physical objects and you say that those are also being thrown in there, it tells you that John is conveying this idea of the lake of fire is actually much more than just a physical thing. It is a termination of everything that goes in it. The destruction of the thing, because it's designed for destructive purposes. Now, we'll kind of get into that a little bit next week, but that's kind of what I wanted to point out there. Now, that leads me to this next question, which I see that I did not hide the answers to that. Are the beast and the false prophet symbolic?
No.
There's a couple of views here. There's two main views. The first view is that the Antichrist, of course, is a real person. The beast is a real person. The false prophet is a real, they're an individual. You could actually literally go and point them out on a most wanted list and you would find they're an individual, okay? That's option one. Option two is that the beast and the false prophet are symbolic of a system or of like a power. So a religious system. So for instance, the false prophet is symbolic of the religious system of Babylon, right? Now I'm not saying you have to agree with that. I'm just saying that there are actually many theologians. In fact, there's probably more theologians that believe that the beast and false prophet are actually symbolic and not literal individuals. They symbolize the power of the religious immoral system that is put in place in Babylon, right? Now, my point is that I'm not taking a stance on whether I think they're actually real people or symbolic. My whole point is that Revelation is so symbolic that we should be very careful about attaching I know for certain that this is a person and not a symbol. We have to, that's all I'm saying is we should extend some caution. And here's what here's the reason why. I just picked out a few of these. Go look through Revelation. There are many cases where Revelation uses a person, but it's very clear that this is not a person. This is symbolic of a system or a kingdom or something like that. And because Revelation does that extensively, we should be very careful. Even if we think the beast and false prophet are real people, we should be very careful about being super dogmatic about it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's my only thing, is that the caution. So when you get to Revelation 20 and it talks about this beast and false prophet being tortured forever and ever, you might want to pull back just a little bit and say, even if you say, yeah, I think they are, but I have some reservation about being dogmatic about it. Does that all make sense? That's my whole point here. And I'll give you just some examples of this. Revelation 12, 1 through 4, we have this woman dressed with the sun and chased by a dragon. Nobody believes that you're going to see a woman wearing the sun. By the way, if she's wearing the sun, she'd destroy the earth, because the earth would be destroyed if she was actually wearing the sun. I mean, no one expects to see a woman, personified here, dressed and chased by an actual literal dragon.
There's symbolic for that as an astronomy major. Every September, October, the Virgin is followed by the Draco, the dragon, and I think that's one of the Revelation that's describing that in the sky.
Yeah. So even if that's true, even if that's true, it's not a woman.
No,
Yeah. This is all symbolic. It's like, in fact, I just picked out a few. Literally, if you went back and looked at Revelation, you could pick out more times when it's clear that the thing that looks like a person is not a person. Right? So I'm just picked out a few of them for you here. And I'm not saying where I land on that position. I'm just telling you that you should approach it with some due caution. Revelation 13, 1 through 4, we see this monster that's got 7 heads taking over the world and being worshipped by people. No one expects to see an actual literal monster with 7 heads. Okay. In fact, when you go back to Daniel's prophecies, Daniel describes what that is, and that they're kings and things like that. So in other words, this isn't going to be a monster. We shouldn't expect to be back in medieval times with,
This is, again, I don't want to belabor Revelation 12, but the way it says here, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
Correct.
Now, that happens every September. So some Jews say this is when Christ is going to come again, because that describes every September the sun when it goes through the woman at her feet and the moon's at her feet. You can predict the day. That happens every year. So just
but
wait. Well,
still, that's a symbol. That's a symbol.
Exactly.
There's no woman that actually has the moon underneath her with 12 stars. Okay.
But they're there. Now, all I'm saying is it's signed in the heavens, and
Yeah.
if you're an astronomy person, you can say that happens every September.
Yeah. But my whole point is that this is all it's all symbolism, right? Revelation 8, 10 through 11, stars falling into bodies of water. Again, any star that falls into the ocean or whatever else, so the earth is going to destroy the earth, right? We know these stars. In fact, we know these stars are symbols for angels. Okay. So again, symbols. We've got, Revelation 5:6. We've got this resurrected lamb with 7 eyes. Now, I don't expect when I walk up to Jesus, I'm going to see Jesus with 7 eyes on his forehead. The 7 eyes are a symbol, right? Okay. So we've got Revelation 18. We've got this whore of Babylon. She's symbolic for. There's not some woman over here that's got millions of lovers. This is symbolic, and it's very clear from Revelation 18 that the whore is a symbol of the city of Babylon itself. The city of Babylon was where the nations hoard themselves and everything else. So all you have to do is go through there and take a look at it, which, again, leads me to believe, sorry, I'm not quite done yet. Going back to, and this one does pertain to what we're talking about tonight, we've got Daniel chapter 7. And you've read through this before, but I just want you to read through it with a little bit of a different perspective here. Daniel chapter 7 says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. Okay, you got beasts here. Now, these beasts are obviously symbols. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of the man was given to it, and behold, another beast, second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side, it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke it in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took a seat, and his clothing was white as snow, and his hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Here we go, books being opened. I looked, and because of the sound of the great words which the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season of time. Their dominion. These beasts represent not individuals, but kingdoms, right? You had the Babylonians, you had the Medes and Persians, you had the Greeks, you had the Romans. Those are going to be your 4 beasts, right? So all I'm saying here is that this idea of the beast and stuff like that, which then Revelation heavily goes back to the book of Daniel for a lot of its symbolism. We know for a fact that when you take a look at the symbolism in Daniel, the symbolism is not a person, the symbolism are kingdoms, right? And Daniel even tells you that that's exactly what it means, that this is who these are. All right. I already kind of covered this one here about the second death. I just don't think, again, I don't think this Revelation 20, first of all, it just does not say that the wicked are going to be tormented forever and ever. So I think that is, it's just not even strong. I know they like to claim it's strong, but to me, there's really not much of a confusion there at all. Now, I have very quickly, 3 additional points about eternal conscious torment that I want to make tonight. And then next week, we'll get on to the very last one, and we'll finish it next week, Lord willing. And that is conditional immortality. But let's take a look at kind of 3 issues. There's lots of them here, but I just wanted to have a couple of the biggies. First of all, eternal conscious torment doesn't account for the substitutionary atonement of Christ sufficiently. What do I mean by that? Well, the substitutionary atonement of Christ, okay, means that Jesus took our place. He was our substitution. So whatever the punishment was that was due to you, he took it in your place. Does that make sense? Okay. And if you do not have the atonement of Christ on your life, you will in fact pay the price that you were supposed to pay, which we know was Death. Now, what did Christ suffer on our behalf? What was the price he paid? Death. Here's the point. When you talk to people that believe in eternal conscious torment and you don't talk about hell, they will agree and that Jesus took our place, that he died in our place, whatever else, they'll do that. But all of a sudden, when you bring in hell, they want to switch what the penalty was. They want to switch that the penalty was his suffering on the cross. They want to point to the fact that, yes, Jesus took your place. Look, he suffered on the cross for you. And the reason why they want to do that, this little switcheroo, is because if the penalty is mere suffering, but not death, then the wicked will suffer for all of eternity. They're going to get the same they're going to get the same penalty that Jesus took in a place. The Bible does not say that. The Bible says what the penalty for sin is death, and what does it say is the atoning work of Christ? It is his what? Death. Over and over again. His death, his death, his death, his death, his death. His suffering was just a means to get to his death. His death, right? So the fact that he suffered, that's not the price that people are going to pay in hell. There will be suffering in hell, but that's not the price. That's not what God said way back in Genesis, that what would happen. It would be, in fact, sin is going to lead to death. The problem from eternal conscious torment is that nothing dies. Think about it. The wicked are raised. They've got a resurrected body, and then they get thrown into hell. What dies? No, it can't. You might think so. So first of all, their body doesn't die. They're being consumed, but they're never fully consumed. So the body never dies. They never experience physical death. It can't be their spirit or the soul, because guess what? When an individual is conceived, are they spiritually dead or alive? Yes.
They're alive.
No, spiritually.
Yeah.
Dead. If what you mean by spiritually is a connection to God. You're born separated from God. And so if you are wicked, it means you have never been what?
You said conceived?
When a person's conceived, they are separated from God. Okay? Spiritually. I mean, they're alive. Obviously, they're alive. I don't mean that. I mean spiritually. The wicked have never been what? They've never been spiritually alive, connected to God. So they can't suffer spiritual death in hell because they've always been spiritually dead. They're already dead. I mean, you can't kill something that's already dead. So you can't say that what dies in hell is spiritual, which is why the eternal conscious torment people will say, well, what it means is separation from God. Well, it can't mean that either, because they're already said, you're right. If you just put your logic hat on here, the wicked have always been separated from God. And so, but just by moving them from one location from Hades and putting them into another location, the lake of fire, that doesn't separate them any more than what they were. They were already separated. They're born separated. So my whole point here is this: literally on eternal conscious torment, the wicked never die. But then it means that the penalty that Christ paid is not the same. He didn't actually take your payment. Because if that's the case, the payment that is due to you, if you're wicked, isn't death. The payment for you is, I don't know what it is, actually. To be honest with you, I don't know what it is, because from the moment of birth, you've been spiritually separated from God, and your body never dies. So I don't know actually what happens to you in hell from an eternal conscious torment perspective. And what it means is that Christ didn't actually take your punishment. He took some other form of punishment. Like, God did something to Christ that he's never going to do to the wicked. But that then is a bigger issue, because it makes God a monster. Because what he did is he killed his own son when he, in fact, didn't need to kill him. Does that all make sense? Why would God kill Jesus if, in fact, the penalty was not death?
What was he redeeming us for? And from what?
From
Sins?
On the cross.
that's exactly where I was going. What it does, it makes God an immoral monster. It makes him into literally a child abuser, because if the penalty was just to make Christ suffer, He could have been beaten. He could have been nailed on a cross. And then when the religious leaders said, if you are the Son of God, come off the cross, he would have. There's absolutely no reason for God to have him die. That is an overreach of what was necessary. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Because no one dies. In eternal conscious torment, nothing dies. So Jesus didn't take your place. He did the punishment God put on him is something that the wicked will never suffer. Okay, so to be honest with you, this is one of the biggest theological issues that I have, and I've talked to a lot of people. Some of them you'll know that have their PhDs and everything else. This one right here is a toughie because when they start to walk their way through it, it's stumbling all over the place and trying to make sense of this. If you remove hell from it, they are great theologians when it comes to substitutionary atonement. But all of a sudden you throw hell into it and then you ask the question, what dies? They'll give that same response that you said. Well, they spiritually die. You walk them through it, say, no, nothing dies here. It can't be those things. What else? It's just that's the problem with this view. Nothing dies. The substitutionary atonement of Christ requires that he took your penalty, death. Something must die, and then ECT, nothing dies. All right. Sorry, let me go on here real quickly. If you take a look, number 2 is God never prescribes torture as the penalty for sin. Read the whole Old Testament, New Testament. Not once will you see that God prescribes torture as a means of dealing with sin. In fact, when you take a look at the worst sins, the worst crimes, what is the maximum punishment God metes out to sinners?
Death, it's usually pretty
Death.
immediate.
That's right, it's death. That's the worst God gets. God says, now that doesn't mean that the process of death isn't painful. Like certainly there can be a tremendous amount of pain in the process of dying, but the prescription that God says is not ongoing torture. He doesn't prescribe them to go put someone on the rack and just keep on whipping them and do whatever else.
No, when his armies go in obedience and occupy a land or take over a nation, like they are supposed to. That's a human upon human death, the cause of death. But when the married couple who were hiding their sale of the land and those types of things, when they're
Ananias
struck
and
dead,
Sapphira, yeah.
it's pretty immediate.
Yeah, and here's
There's
my
no
here's
beating
my
or
here's my
flogging or- just they're dead.
yeah, here's my point. God doesn't prescribe torture. So when the whole scripture points to the fact that capital punishment is used quite often by God, other means are plagues and famine and stuff like that, but God does not prescribe torture for dealing with sin. It would seem to go way off script for God to suddenly then say, oh, now when we get to the idea of hell, I'm going to change how I actually deal justice-wise. We see God's justice.
Was when it was Christ scourged, by his stripes?
Yeah.
Wasn't that torture?
By the Romans, but again, that wasn't what the
By the
penalty. The penalty wasn't to have Christ tortured. The reason for the scourging was what? What did the scourging do? It hastened his what?
His death.
Yeah. The reason why Christ was tortured by the Romans for a very limited period of time, by the way, crucifixion, was so that he could actually die. The bloodletting of Christ was so that his life would, Leviticus chapter 17 says that the life is in the blood. That's the reason why they weren't allowed to eat blood. Christ was brutalized to the point of death. But the object wasn't for Christ just to be tortured on a cross and then to get off the cross and say it's finished. The whole idea of the crucifixion was that he would in fact die.
So the price that he paid wasn't that.
It's death.
Pardon? It was death. It was the death. It wasn't.
And the Bible repeatedly says that it's by his death. By his death. So in other words, the penalty is death, not.
But a lot of times there's a lot of symbolism given to, at least in my.
I do want to go on here, but let me just, I'm not saying that in the process of dying, there isn't pain and anguish, and that some people don't die, that some people aren't tortured and then die. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that there isn't symbolism in, by his stripes you're healed, Isaiah 53. I'm not saying that there isn't some symbolism in the act of going through it. But that's not what the Bible says the atonement is. The atonement is his death. That's the whole point. Did he get tortured by the Romans on the process of being killed? Sure. But the torture isn't the punishment that is due the wicked. Punishment is due the wicked is the wage of sin is death. That's my whole point.
Just due to the saints.
Yeah.
For taking up the cross.
Anyway, my whole point about this is this. Now, eternal conscious torment people sometimes say, well, the reason why people are tortured for all of eternity is because of who the crime is committed against. Okay? So if you are God is an infinite being, therefore when you sin against him, you deserve infinite punishment, means for all of eternity. The problem is first of all, that's not the biblical record. Go back and look at the entire biblical record. God's method that he explicitly says is what? Particularly in the Old Testament was lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And in the law of Moses, God specifically said it didn't matter if you're the king or a pauper, you get the same penalty. Didn't matter if you're, foreigners, if you did something against a foreigner, you killed a foreigner, guess what? Yeah, it doesn't matter. From God's perspective, it didn't matter because it's not about who the crime was committed against. It was, in fact, related to what crime was committed. Does that make sense? That's God's method of justice. Now, they've turned it on its head to say, no, it's not what you've done, it's who you've done it against that matters. So when you've done against God, that's a greater, more infinite punishment. That is actually a defense that was developed in the Middle Ages because people started asking this question and they had to come up philosophically with a defense. Well, they came up with that based off of the feudal system of medieval Europe, which was that. If you committed a small crime against the king, you'd die. If you committed that same crime against, your fellow, pauper, they didn't care. In fact, you could kill each other and they probably wouldn't do a whole lot. So the whole idea of it mattered who you did it against and not necessarily the crime came out of the feudal Europe idea. And that was used as a defense for God when God himself in his own, the Bible does not say that. Now, finally, the last thing here, and actually I've got 4. Can you give me 3 more minutes? I'm going to race through these. So let me just race through them. First of all, and you mentioned this earlier, evil's never fully dealt with or eradicated. Under eternal conscious torment, you've got this eternal prison where evil continues to exist for all over time. Some people, but not all, believe that the wicked will continue to sin on and on for all of eternity. That's the reason why they deserve, punishment for all of eternity, because they keep on sinning. That means that evil is being conducted for all of eternity if you hold to that view. It's never eradicated, it's never dealt with. It's just some sort of cosmic prison that we keep all the bad people away and so that we can enjoy our bliss. But God never actually destroys evil. God never wins. Good never triumphs. Good, isolates evil, but it never defeats evil under this view. It's not defeated, right? It's just kept in some sort of a cosmic prison. All right. Last one. The eternal bliss and removal of all sorrow is impossible if ECT is true. Now, I say impossible. Some people would say improbable. Probably improbable is a better word there than impossible. What I mean by that is that, look, the righteous are going to spend eternity, and we're told that there will be no more sorrow, no more tears. We're going to spend this eternal bliss. The question is, how do you do that when you know that your family members, your friends, co-workers, relatives, other people are being tortured every single second of every single moment for all of eternity? Now, you got to answer that question. How can I be over here happy, and whatever else when I know that a family member is being tortured? Okay? Well, here are the 3 typical responses you're going to get. And I don't think any of them hold any water. They don't, again, this is more subjective now. I'm just telling you that I think this is, for me, a philosophical problem with this view. The first one is that just says, hey, look, we're just going to be so in love with Jesus. And we're just going to be so just happy with what's going on that we're not even going to think about them. It's sort of this ignorance. We're not for one moment of eternity going to ever think about my wife or my son or my brother or whatever it is, right? The person that I love on this earth and I'd give my life for. I'm going to be just so in love with Jesus that there won't be one moment of eternity. Because if there's even one moment of eternity where I think, oh man, they're being burned right now. Their flesh is being burned off of them in the moment. Even that one moment would mean that the no more tears, no more sorrow isn't true. So on this view, literally, you're never going to think about it because you're just going to be enjoying Jesus and all bliss. I think that is such a wildly implausible idea. I call it impossible, but I think it's just wildly implausible. The second one is kind of the middle of the road, which just says this: because the righteous will actually be there to witness the judgment of the wicked. And I'm going to look at my brother or wife or child, the person I love dearly in this life, and I'm going to look at it. And as the books are opened up and God walks his way through it, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, you know what? They are wicked, like wicked to the core. And I'm going to look at it and say, amen, Jesus, you are 100% right. Mark it up. And so they deserve that. They deserve to be tortured. And it's really more of, I'll call it a factual thing. We've gone down the list. I've looked at all the stuff. Everything checks off. And so it doesn't bother me because you just deserve it, I guess. But even if you had a nice, I like watch crime shows and that kind of stuff. Even if you are a parent and you know that your son or daughter has committed, I don't know, mass murder, it still doesn't mean that you go to the trial and be like, oh yeah, everything's all good and we're all, hey, let's let's go on vacation when the trial's done, right? I mean, you are crushed at knowing what that is, right? So I don't think that that one is good. Now, this other one is what I'll call the more extreme form, but some of the some people that you guys will have heard of, great theologians hold this view, and I find this to be actually reprehensible. Not them, just the view. And this is that the view that, in fact, we will be happy that they're being tortured for all of eternity, because when we see them being given the justice that's due to them, it will reflect on God and give him so much glory that it will actually make us happy. We'll be more in love with God. And we will actually, some of them are described as being giddy. We'll be getting happy, like, go God, go type of a thing, because it just shows God's justice and his love, right? Believe me, it's hard. That is a view, but to me, none of those three responses do a lick of good for me personally. I know it's subjective, but I have a big issue with this whole idea, because there can't be 1 second of eternity where I think about them, and if I experience one moment of sorrow, then God's promise isn't true. So one of these has got to then be true over here. And for me, I can't put anything in any of these. They all seem impossible. So that's all I'm going to say about eternal conscious torment. As you can tell, I think this is, to be honest with you, out of the three views, I think this is by far the least likely of the views. I actually think universal reconciliation has more going for it, even though I don't hold to that, has more going for it than eternal conscious torment. Just biblically. Biblically, I think it's more sound than ECT. All right, that's it for tonight. Any questions you have? Any final questions or comments before we wrap up? Okay, we will talk about the third view next week, conditional immortality, which is the view that I hold, and I hope you'll see it and be like, that actually just makes sense. It just makes sense of the plain language of Scripture, and we'll just go with it. All right, any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.